I don't know if others are having the same reaction as me, but I'm feeling déjà vu. The images and stories that are emerging from Gaza are horrific. They remind me of the Vietnam War. Not only the images, but the morally bankrupt actions of an arrogant government are also like that of Uncle Sam in the 1960s in Vietnam. And like in the Vietnam era, we are witnessing a fast-growing protest movement. More and more people are taking to the streets, carrying signs, and sending letters of protest to their congressmen and senators. The main message is, enough is enough. This war and the war crimes have got to stop. We seem to be stuck in a time warp, like about 1967, when a majority of politically active American people were against the war. Now, they are against Israel's aggressive actions. Aggressive actions against an almost defenseless group of Palestinians trapped in Gaza. The world is talking about war crimes as hospitals and schools are bombed. 50% of the death toll, now exceeding 1,000 people, are children. The main power plant and water treatment facility has been destroyed in violation of international laws. Some people are even saying, like in Vietnam, this event was triggered by a false flag. In the midst of the growing public outrage, politicians in both Israel and the U.S. are mostly ignoring the people and speaking in half-baked justifications about how Israel has a right to defend itself, while ignoring the larger context of history, where Israel has already taken over most of the land of the former Palestine and has pushed its birth citizens into ghettos and tiny strips of land cut off from the outside world. What is missing now is the emergence of a major figure from the inside of Washington who will speak out against the war of genocide. We saw that in 1967 after a period of indecision. The tide was turning as far as the people were concerned, but no major politician of stature was willing to take on Lyndon Baines Johnson, who had taken over a small war from JFK and escalated it into an unfair contest between the huge might of imperial America and the peasants in a country of jungles and backward cities. What we need now is a major figure, a Robert F. Kennedy, to step forward and run against this war effort. It will not be easy to find someone amongst the psychopathic zombies who are our politicians today, someone who has the right courage and moral sensitivity to take on this heroic task. It is interesting to look back at the challenges that RFK faced in making the decision to oppose LBJ and his war. So now, I will share with you a fascinating 5-minute excerpt from a 2-hour documentary about the life of Robert Kennedy. And after that, I will have a few more words to offer at the end.
As the carnage continued, senators and congressmen from Lyndon Johnson's own party began to speak out against the war. But Bobby Kennedy still hesitated.
It took Kennedy a long time to decide he was going to oppose the Vietnam War. It was an agonizing process of indecision. He values courage above all other human qualities, and he realizes he's not displaying courage. He's not displaying leadership. But he was conflicted.
Not until February 1967 would Kennedy break decisively with the president, after a bitter confrontation in the White House.
So mad.
And Bobby comes back to his office and says,
president's unhinged. I mean, he was abusive and maybe just not mentally stable.
He told his aides that he would never again have anything to do with Lyndon Johnson, that the way he had been treated was so inexcusable that he could simply never have any real dealings with the man past that point.
A month later, Bobby rose in the Senate, condemned the morality of the war, and then admitted his own share of responsibility. "I can testify," he said, "that if fault is to be found, there is enough to go around for all, including myself."
He is the first politician of either party to take responsibility for what's happening in Vietnam. The first politician to accept blame, which gives a moral strength to the argument that he's making.
Do we have the right here in the United States to say that we're going to kill tens of thousands, make millions of people as we have, millions of people refugees, kill women and children as we have? I very seriously question whether we have that right. Now we're saying we're going to fight there so that we don't have to fight in Thailand, so that we don't have to fight on the west coast of the United States so that they won't move across the Rockies. But do we, our whole moral position, it seems to me, changes tremendously.
Robert Kennedy in 1967 has come to question the basic assumptions of the war. He has begun to question whether we really do need to make a stand in Vietnam to protect that region from communism. He's come to question whether our national security interest in Vietnam is outweighed by the incredible human suffering that we're inflicting by waging war in this country. He's questioning the moral legitimacy of this war, which is something that he hasn't done to this point. He's confronted by new issues, and he grows in order to be able to face these challenges. He really learns from experience, and he really becomes something much larger than what he was when he began.
He becomes more and more thoughtful, more and more philosophical, more and more ready to accept that he does not have a monopoly on wisdom. That maybe this war in Vietnam was a fundamental mistake, and that maybe his brother would have gotten out.
Most people acquire certainties as they grow older. Bobby Kennedy discarded certainties. He grew. He started as this zealot, and he ended up as this man very sympathetic to those who were the despised and rejected of life.
Robert Kennedy was now reaching out to Americans everywhere who had been left behind. He had fully awakened from his dark night of mourning. The moral impulse to fight evil and do good that had always been a part of him was taking a new direction.
He wanted to know what life was like for someone else. He would ask, "What do you feel? What do you think?" He wanted to be inside the eyes of America's casualties. He wanted to see the world the way they saw it.
People believed in his understanding of their situation because he visibly was moved. He was someone who responded in the most graphic, human, emotional terms. He was somebody who bled, who was raw from the hurt done to others.
The hurt he felt from the assassination of his brother gave him that empathy for everyone else who hurt after that. I think he did begin to change incrementally while he was Attorney General before his brother was killed, but I think that all grew dramatically after his brother's murder, because then he identified.
RFK's decision to oppose the war was a measure of his personal courage. It was easy in some ways for him to oppose Johnson, whom he hated. But it was also a rejection of his brother's judgment in entering Vietnam in the first place. In getting to the decision, he had to be willing to question the basic assumptions of the Vietnam War. And so today, we need someone who is willing to question the big picture. Should the U.S. be supporting Israel at all? They are the largest recipient, taking over half of the U.S. foreign aid budget, as well as many favors and subsidies, counted and uncounted. If the U.S. cuts off and refuses any more aid until Israel complies with UN resolutions. It could stop Israel in its tracks, shorten the conflict, and move Israel towards a genuine truce. An end to conflict would save lives on both sides. The relationship and the so-called friendship that the U.S. has with Israel has been so one-sided, it cannot be described as a true friendship at all. It is an abusive relationship, and the time has come to talk about ending it. Standing up to Israel and its financial power will not be easy. An increasingly corrupted legal and political process in America has moved things to a point where big donors can buy politicians all over our country without limit. Because the U.S. Supreme Court passed a bizarre law saying money was free speech, and corporations were people too, with the right of free speech. If corporations are people, let them wait until they are 18 years old to exercise the right of free speech, and subject them directly to the full force of government interference, to drafts, to the loss of their future when war hits, to high taxes, and to the inevitability of retirement if they last long enough. Else, they have advantages which will make them far too powerful for ordinary people to oppose. This is where we are today. The corporations and the power of their money is destroying true democracy in America. The crazy campaign financing laws need to be rolled back, and the power of donors like AIPAC and other wealthy foreigners who are interested in buying politicians needs to be sharply curtailed. What is also needed is an end to the one-sided votes and stolen power of U.S.-Israeli dual citizens. We need political leaders who have no doubts or conflicts in their thinking. Our leaders need to know where their loyalties lie. America first. The interests of war criminal nations needs to come last or not be felt at all. One line in the documentary really resonated with me, and here it is. The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality. RFK said that, and he was quoting from Dante's Inferno. With wisdom and courage, and after a long deliberation, Robert Kennedy turned on the war and said, "It was time to get out." Now is the time for all Americans of conscience to recognize Israel's transgressions against Palestinians. Now is the time for the U.S. to back only those politicians who have America as their first loyalty and who have the wisdom and courage to refuse AIPACs campaign funding. They also have to have the courage to demand that the U.S. stop providing any financial support for a country now engaged in war crimes and genocide. Put an end to it. Stop the war in Gaza.